It's all very well to talk about the need to stand strong in the face of climate change, but words won't become action without the right investments. That's where climate finance comes in. But what is it? I'm Doina Pupușoi, a climate change finance and agroecology specialist at IFAD, the United Nations agency serving small-scale producers. And this is what you need to know about climate finance. Climate finance is when investors put together resources to support climate action from the policy level right down to the ground. The sources of financing can be public or private, and investments are dedicated at either mitigating the effects of climate change by reducing emissions, which is trying to reverse the damage we have already done, or to support adaptation measures such as preventing the worst of what is inevitable. So, how much is needed for the planet to respond to the challenges posed by climate change? Well, estimates are pretty big. Just think that today we would need approximately 180 to 300 billion US dollars per year for climate adaptation alone by 2030. The gap for mitigation is even larger. We're gonna need a whopping of 850 billion US dollars per year by the end of the decade. And if we manage to get there, who do you think is the most in need of climate finance? Right, the rural poor. Poor rural people are in greater need of climate finance than anyone, especially in developing countries, where climate change is hitting hardest and where vulnerable small-scale farmers produce around 60 to 80% of the food. These are people who are often stewards of and dependent on fragile ecosystems for their lives in a time of climate change-related biodiversity collapse. Yet, they receive less than 2% of the total funds dedicated to addressing the climate crisis. This must change. How can we direct climate finance to small-scale producers? Here's an example. Resources can be channeled to governments. Governments, in turn, can support small-scale producers with those funds in such a way that they are used for climate-resilient practices. On top of this, risk associated with investments in agriculture can be reduced, and we can find innovative ways to engage the private sector and close the existing investment gap. The world cannot just continue to do nothing while hundreds of millions risk food insecurity, malnutrition, and forced migration. With the right quantity and direction of funding, poor rural people can become more resilient to climate change for generations to come.